the difficulty, it's when I was asked to speak here tonight, the difficulty that I often have in addressing this particular issue is the same difficulty that journalists in Canada have in North America have in addressing any number of significant foreign policy, domestic policy, economic policy issues, and that is that the newsrooms are empty. The degree to which we have seen a hemorrhaging of journalistic capacity in Canada is really quite something over the past few years, and those news organizations that do have some resources do not devote resources to the story of the rise of Xi Jinping's China and the influence of that grotesque torture state in the world's liberal democracies. About 3 years ago, I was in a bar in Ottawa with Jeremy Nuttall, who's with the Toronto Star, who also writes as much as he can and does a tremendous job writing about China and the influence of the embassies and the consulates, the embassy and the consulates of Canada. And he said, you know, Glavin, are we the only two journalists in this country that are covering China from a national security angle? And I thought, I can't be right. And I thought a little bit more, and I said, you know what, you're right. And this is ridiculous because, you see, I'm a contributing editor in Maclean's magazine. I have a unique relationship with the Post Media, because the National Post and the Ottawa Citizen share me, and they have no quarrel with me working for Maclean's. I cover that unhelpful category, foreign policy and international human rights and democracy and so on, and I spend a lot of time on the road. And even so, covering China, the influence and the extent and the breadth and the scope of Chinese foreign direct investment in Canada, the degree to which the Chinese state has bought a tremendous amount of Canadian resources in the oil patch, for instance, is something I just kind of do off the side of my desk whenever I have time. Something has changed, though. It's nice to have smart technical people around. Something has changed in the last couple of years. The first is that one of these characters who shows up doing public relations work for the foreign policy establishment of the Canada-China Business Council Embassy. I don't think I'll name him, but he used to be the editor-in-chief of Glavin, and they fired him, and that was great, because ever since then, the Glavin Mail has started to come on stream a little bit. Stuff that I was writing a decade ago that columnists in the Glavin Mail were describing as radical have now been adopted as the official editorial division of the Glavin Mail. So that's a good thing. That was a big shift. The ability that I've been given by my editors to bang on about this stuff has helped, and it's made room, I think, for other journalists as well to focus on the story. The big break that we all had, and it happened at a time when my old colleague Jonathan Manthorpe wrote a book that was published called about a history of Chinese influence in Canada. In this instance, please forgive me, I'm just shorthand when I say Chinese influence, which I welcome and love. I mean, in this instance, the influence of Chinese foreign. That book came out right around the same time that Maclean, the Chief Financial Officer for Huawei Technologies Limited, was apprehended in Vancouver on American extradition request, and in retaliation, the Chinese government kidnapped Michael Pollard and Michael Spauer. And then suddenly it was okay to write about how ghastly the China lobby is, how sinister and corrupt the China business lobby is. And so I used to, when I was younger, I used to get really mad when I got scooped on stories. I don't get scooped much, but when I do on China, I don't mind anymore. For years, it was lonely, I mean, I wrote my first story on Huawei selling gear to the Khomeini regime in Iran so that they could spy on dissidents. Huawei deliberately using Canada as a means to evade American and UN sanctions on Iran 9 years ago. There are headlines that I'm reading, even this week and last month, that were the same headlines in my columns in the Ottawa Citizen 9 years ago. There's a number of myths, I don't know how else to describe them, that have arisen in the sort of discourse about Canada-China relations that have become, they're extremely difficult to dislodge. But there are a number of them related specifically to Huawei. It's a great case study. It's happening right now. She was pinched here on the west coast of Canada, so it's a good story to tell. And I'm going to be going through those in a minute. But I think the key thing about the great contribution that Doris has made and the focus on the Confucius Institute in Toronto and Confucius Institutes generally, and of course the magnificent contribution that Brad West and only a couple of his comrades, I regret to say, elected municipal officials in British Columbia have made in getting that hideous event off the agenda of the Union of BC Municipalities. This is why it's significant, is that institutions and initiatives like the Confucius Institute and that soiree that the Beijing's emissaries were holding with UBCM are all about normalization, okay? You have to remember that and think about that. That the degree to which the foreign policy establishment in Canada and Fort Pearson, Global Affairs, and the Department of Foreign Affairs and International Trade, all the institutes, many of the universities, faculties, have been captured by money and Chinese money, Beijing's money. It's a really difficult thing to get at as a journalist because it's being normalized. Everything's just normal, it's ordinary. You get these lovely looking fellows in their perfectly tailored suits coming into the UBCM, and they're all being nice and shaking hands, and everything seems lovely. It's normalized, right? That's the thing. And the thing about corruption that makes it different than any other political vices is the more of it there is, the more difficult it is to talk about it. I could spend the evening talking about one institution in Canada that is essentially controlled by what is euphemistically described as Friends of China. And it's the Canadian Senate. We basically lost the Senate. I'm going to quickly run through some mythologies about Huawei and how they got normalized is really interesting. I mean, they're a sponsor of Hockey Night in Canada, if you don't mind. They came to this country because they were deliberately trying to get into North America without having to go through the portal of the United States. Martin Cauchon, who was a Liberal cabinet minister, when we were subsidizing one of the richest corporations on earth to open a campus on the outskirts of Ottawa, said, well, if you can't beat them, join them. We've had a former Prime Minister of Canada who works for Beijing Dacheng. Nobody mentions that. It's one of the largest law firms on earth. Whenever he's trotted out as an elder statesman that should be giving us advice, we've had John McCallum openly says to a reporter from the South China Morning Post, yeah, I've been talking to my colleagues in the Chinese Ministry of Foreign Affairs about how China may conduct itself in such a way as to ensure that the Liberals are re-elected. John Turner, a former Deputy Prime Minister, routinely trotted out to give out of himself about why we should blame Jody Wilson-Raybould, if you don't mind, for the kidnapping of Michael Kovrig and Michael Spavor, and the difficulty that we've got into in Guangzhou. Nobody seems to mention that he's on the board of directors of TELUS, and he gets $250,000 every year, and God knows how much, I think $1 million worth of stock that he owns, and TELUS stands to lose, I think, upwards of $1 billion if and when we block Huawei from participating in Canada's 5th generation internet rollout later this year. Eddie Goldenberg, same thing. Who's he working for? I mean, I could go on and on and on, but I just wanted to conclude on a funny note. They're not all liberals, by the way, and I'm not a partisan. I don't want to be mean to the liberals. They're mostly liberals, I can't deny. But Stockwell Day was mentioned, okay? And Stockwell Day, I think it was last October, described and likened the China's Belt and Road Initiative, which is a global encircling economic paradigm to replace the liberal world order that we've come to become accustomed to since the end of the Second World War, with something run by the Chinese Communist Party, described in Vancouver at a forum. The Belt and Road Initiative he likened to the invention of the wheel and the discovery of fire. So these are the, I mean, they're not, the thing is, they're not smart, a lot of these people, right? But they're there, and they're ubiquitous, and they are deeply entrenched in the corporate class in Canada. You know, it's no mistake, it should be no mystery that the Chinese Communist Party has come to apprehend the Liberal Party of Canada as the political wing of the Canada-China Business Council. And it's this normalization that we've got to get at. It's got to be people, all kinds of people, and we have public opinion on our side, by the way, hands down. There's nothing that I've said, no opinion I've ever expressed on China that is not an opinion that's held by the overwhelming majority of Canadians. What we have to do is we have to say, as Brad West did, as Doris has done, no, this is not normal. This is not ordinary. I won't put up with it. We're Canadians. We believe in certain things, and we stand with the overwhelming majority of the people of Hong Kong and China, with our Uyghur Muslim brothers and sisters, and we will not put up with it. This is not normal. So that's my story on